I'm Sarah, and I am a sustainable living advocate turned climate justice activist. I've always really had a bleeding green heart for as long as I can remember. My mom taught me to recycle, always screamed at me from the top of the stairs to put off the lights. And so I guess that was ingrained in me. And as I grew up, I always imagined I would be, some kind of hippie from the hippie generation, 1960s. I was always inspired by them. And I got to university, and I joined the Green Campus Initiative. And I was the one in the crazy jumpsuit running around campus saying, don't use that, use the recycling bin, and, we can all make a difference, just, do these kind of small changes together. And from there, I got my first job at a green hotel. And I saw there at a hotel that had this zero waste to landfill target, how much waste was being brought in by the guests. And, I thought I was doing well. I was recycling, I was doing all these things, and I thought I was pretty far off on this green journey of mine. But every payday, on the 25th, every month, I would go and I would buy a coffee for me and my friends in a disposable cup. And I slowly realized that I was actually part of the problem in terms of this consumer throwaway culture. And I so drastically wanted to change that. So I embarked on what I called a sustainable living journey. I stopped buying fast fashion. I stopped buying new clothes altogether. Everything that I'm wearing is secondhand. I really tried hard not to buy fruit and vegetables with plastic, shopping at markets, or when I was at a grocery store, always looking what I could possibly avoid without plastic. I started eco-bricking. And does everybody know what eco-bricking is? Awesome. Okay, so I started eco-bricking. I created my own zero waste kit where I could completely avoid as much plastic as possible. My own coffee cups, my own straws, my own produce bags. And I eliminated plastic in the bathroom and in the kitchen, everywhere that I possibly could. I saved water, I did all these things. But as I did it, I slowly realized how inaccessible so many of these choices was to the majority of South Africans and the majority of people in the world. I decided to start my own business, and I basically did sustainability communication. So I would work with NGOs and brands who wanted to make a difference. And one of those brands was Fossil Free South Africa. And what they do is they lobby big corporates, banks, governments to divest from fossil fuels, coal, oil, and gas. And basically what they did is they profiled a bunch of people who were directly affected by these problems, by the burning of coal. And we quickly learned how this wasn't just an issue that each individual is causing, but it's a systemic issue at a government and a greater level. Currently, the world's indigenous population makes up just 5% of the global population, but they're actually protecting 80% of the biodiversity. And that tells you something of a systemic problem that's happening all around the world. Then the IPCC report came out, and not to put a sense of doom and gloom in the room, but just to bring us back to reality, that the United Nations warned us that we have only 12 years to halve our emissions. So that means we've got to do a whole lot less consuming and a whole lot less burning of coal, oil, gas. But in South Africa's case, a lot less burning of coal. So just 100 companies in the world are responsible for over 70% of the fossil fuels that are created. So it's easy for us to blame ourselves for the problems. And yes, our small changes make a difference. They do. But it's also important to remember that there are bigger systems at play and bigger people who need to take responsibility for these things. So one, sure, it's the consumers that are demanding those products that are burning fossil fuels. So by making these small changes, we absolutely make a difference. But how can we hold government to task? How can we hold the big corporates to task? How can we make the urgent, drastic changes that we need in this really short space of time that we have? Because these incremental changes are great, but can they get us to where we need to be in this short space? Unfortunately not. So what can we do? Get up, stand up. Number one, Okay, use your voice, use your power, all right? This is the biggest thing that turned me into a climate justice activist, is I realized that there were big corporates and governments at play, but that doesn't mean that my individual voice couldn't make a difference when I'm amongst thousands of people. So I joined protests. I stood up and I stood with the youth when 2,000 people stood there in Cape Town earlier this year. Consume less, of course, okay? And this is not just about consuming eco products, but also consuming as little as possible. So use something for as long as you possibly can, and then only replace it when you absolutely need to. Regenerate, right? Plant trees, plant indigenous plants in your back garden. All of these wonderful things, we need to look at restoring the earth. And again, when we come together and we plant and we just form this bond together, that's not only something that creates goodness for the earth, but it's also healing for us. Listen, talk, and understand. So today we're all sitting here and we're listening. What can we do? What are the ways that we can kind of attack, or not attack, but nurture this problem and change this problem? We can talk about it. The climate crisis is a really difficult thing to talk about. It doesn't make anybody feel very good because we think about our future and the potential of some bad things that can be happening in the future. But if we talk about it, it will become easier. And the more people will realize that it's a problem, the more people that will stand up. Understand that there are certain people that are more affected by the climate crisis than others. And we need to listen to those people that are on the front lines, like Indigenous people, like people in poverty. Those are the people that need to be at the front lines leading these causes. Understand that everything is connected, each one of us to the earth. And then, of course, again, like we've spoken about, make those sustainable living choices when you can. Choose to refuse, reduce your meat intake, reduce your water use, all of these things that do make a big difference when we all collectively make these actions. But the biggest thing I think I've learned in becoming an activist is to take courage and believe in your power as an individual. Because you might feel like you have a small voice, but as was said earlier, no person is too small to make a difference. And when we all come together, our voices are hella loud, I'll tell you that. Thank you.